The Holy Gospel according to the 24th chapter of Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. Now on that same day, 2 disciples were going to a village called Ames, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" Jesus asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. And when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were there with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see him." Then Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, Jesus walked ahead as if he were going to go on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. But we had hoped. But we had hoped that the cancer wouldn't return. But we had hoped that the job would last. But we had hoped that rights for people, women, the marginalized would expand, continuing. That we had hoped that racism would be rooted out, but we had hoped that our government would become more just, but we had hoped that a global pandemic would increase our trust in science. What might you add from your own personal life? What have you hoped for? The disciples had hoped. They had hoped that this revolutionary Jesus that they followed, that they watched heal people and feed people and teach in ways that they had never heard, was indeed the Messiah, that his presence would bring Israel back into its rightful place. No longer a people that had been in diaspora or under occupation, no longer a people trampled, taken advantage of by the powers to be. Instead, days before, their leader, in whom they had hoped, died. Crucified in the most humiliating, excruciating way one can imagine. Crucified. This is where we meet these two disciples along the road, walking away from Jerusalem. As we hear later, the other 11 are still there. But they're walking 7 miles to Ames, away from Jerusalem, trying to talk and figure out what happened. And also trying to tease out what it is about this story that these women told about the grave being empty and an angel, and is that even something that's possible, and what in the world, these silly women. Here in their grief, in their dejection, in their longing for what they had hoped, Jesus meets them. Jesus is right there with them in the midst of it, and they don't even know it. Even when Jesus teaches and opens scripture and talks about it, probably in ways that they would find familiar, they still didn't recognize him. And yet, when it seems as though Jesus is going to keep walking, they say, wait, stay with us. It's late. It's about evening. It's dinner time. Come, eat. They take a risk. They invite him to dine with them. This stranger, as it is in our translation, which can also be understood to be migrant or resident foreigner. This is the person that they've shared all of these things about who this Jesus was and how they hoped he overturned the powers that be, had a kind of risky conversation with, actually. They are now taking a next risk of vulnerability. They are inviting him to come and dine, to share a meal, to break bread, to let them care for him. And it is then that their eyes are opened. They are at a table. This might even bring up the feeling that we talk about on Maundy, Thursday, reclining together. An intimacy, a tenderness that happens around tables at this time. That's why inviting people to dinner is such a revolutionary thing. Kind of like the tenderness with which we might imagine Jesus said, Mary, in the garden when she recognized him. Kind of like the tenderness we might imagine Jesus said, peace be with you, as he breathed on the disciples in the upper room. And this tenderness, this moment of vulnerability, is the moment in which the resurrection is revealed to these two. With reminders of the Lord's Supper, with reminders of feeding the 5,000, but as their guest, when he breaks the bread after blessing it. And friends, I am reminded that this is where we encounter Jesus too. At the table with the outsider. As we hear in the Gospels, when you Fill in the blank, to the least of these, you have done so to me. At the table with the outsider, Jesus meets us, not with certainty, but as he did with the disciples on the road, engages our questions, engages the conversation, teaches, and abides, helps us wrestle with what to believe about these things that have happened. And it happens before and even when we do not recognize him, working in our hearts, sharing that love and care. So if you too long to see Jesus, long for this Messiah to be real, long for the resurrection to be true, perhaps that looks a little bit like long walks, risky conversations, quiet dinners, and we had hoped, transitioned and transformed into the resurrection of presence in the midst of our struggle with our hopes and where they are right in this moment, even as Jesus promises that God is at work transforming them over and over and over again. And you know, that doesn't sound so scary to me. In a world where we wonder how to be church today, in a world where our striving would suggest we should create more programs and offer more this and do more that and restart this thing that used to be, and where we're also a little worn out and a little tired and maybe a little overextended and maybe even a little full of grief for all of the things that we had hoped. Maybe, just maybe, gathering at tables, reclining, sharing bread, breaking bread, sharing a meal, even being the recipient of a shared meal. Maybe that's something we can find time for. Maybe that's a way we can invest in being generous, in setting the table, in being sloppy with our invitations, inviting more people than we could possibly actually help, inviting others to the table, to these moments of intimacy, sharing our story, hearing theirs, breaking bread. And perhaps in these kinds of moments, there we will see Jesus. In the person across the table, in the breaking of the bread, in the promises that are made, that Jesus is with you at all times, especially when 2 or 3 are gathered. There we encounter the living Christ, present in the meal and the moment and the other, and in us. Thanks be to God.